Hello, and welcome to this Facebook Live from the Daily Mirror. My name is Richard Innes. I'm a Daily Mirror journalist, and I'm joined today by Rebecca, Daniel and Sarah Bramall from the Teacher Wellbeing Project, who are here to hopefully help allay any worries you have about your children's mental health, your children's feelings about being back at school. So, Rebecca, Sarah, I guess first and foremost, most people, I guess now, or a large proportion of children are now back at school. Obviously, there's been a big focus on getting kids back into school, getting back into the classroom. Where would you begin with your kind of concerns about how the effect this may be having on children's mental health, and I suppose specifically on their perceptions and ideas of what school's about?
Yeah, thank you for having us. Both Rebecca and I are former secondary English teachers, and we know from our experience in secondary education that student mental health and teen mental health particularly is a huge problem that we have to deal with, and it can only have been exacerbated by their experience over this year, which has been, hugely unsettling for all of us, dealing with the uncertainty, particularly the students who have missed exams or who feel that they're behind in their exam work for whatever reason. And just to have, everything that they know, all of that stability and security kind of thrown upside down is inevitably going to have an impact on mental health.
And I think it's really, really important for us to remember that no one's been in this position before. So we need to be able to be sensitive to the fact that everyone is in the same position. And as our young people, they are always looking up to their elders and their elders to kind of guide them and navigate them through these unique times that we find ourselves in. So it's very difficult, I think, for them to be able to understand what's the best thing to do, because as adults, we don't even know what the best thing to do is. So true. We are kind of modeling to them, and they pick up on our emotions, they pick up on our anxieties. Children are very, very clever at doing that. Even as young, I think, as babies, they're really, really in tune with how other people are feeling. And I think that we don't understand that as much as we should do.
So is there something in that, Rebecca, sorry to jump in, but is there something in that then, in terms of kind of basic tips for parents who might be watching this, is trying to show that certainty and almost trying to hide any uncertainty or anxiety you have? Is that kind of the first step in terms of trying to make sure your child feels comfortable?
I think that's a difficult one. Oh, sorry, Sarah. Because I've got a 3-year-old. Sarah's got 3 children that are older, and I would say that there are certain parts of your anxieties that you would share. And I think it's really, really good to be open with your children so that they know that the feelings that they are feeling are normal and they're natural. And we need to create that environment, I think, for them to be able to come to us and share those feelings and those emotions. But then again, if you are, super, super anxious, sometimes we don't want our children also to see that side. So I think there's a balance. And I'll pass over to Sarah, because Sarah's got 3 older children. So I'm coming from the perspective of a mother with a 3-year-old. I do share with her about what's going on, but I'm very sensitive to the fact that she is free. So Sarah, what do you do?
Well, it's interesting. We're actually pretty open with our children. As Rebecca knows, my husband is the lead consultant for the intensive care unit at our local hospital. So we as a family have been through a fair degree of uncertainty in this time, as he has been leading his team through navigating that uncertainty. And we are actually quite open about uncertainty and about why that is so challenging for us as human beings. But in terms of talking to the children, I don't think it's about hiding the anxiety or hiding the uncertainty, but actually about building them up in terms of feeling resilient and feeling confident that we have come through a crazy time this year, and actually look at how far we've come, look at what we've adapted to, which we would never expected to have done so. And if we can do those things and adapt in the way we can, actually we're going to be okay going forward. And that's what I would focus on.
That's interesting. What in terms of, because we're talking in terms of sort of generalities in terms of how we would talk to our children, but in terms of what specifically you can be saying to a child, and I guess Rebecca, you made the point there that you're at the younger end of things, and Sarah, you've got slightly older children. What are the differences in terms of the things you should be saying to a kid potentially who's struggling to settle back into secondary school versus a child who's maybe in reception or primary, or, you know, what are the differences in terms of the specific things that maybe you'd want to say to them to make them feel better?
I think that's a great question, Richard, because I've had that a few times from parents who have said, what should I say? And I don't think that there is a template answer to what you should say or what you shouldn't say. I think it's about what you are comfortable with exposing your child to. And you as a parent, we as parents, we know our children better than anything. But also we need to be aware that there are certain things that we can't hide from our children because other children may know it and they may hear things. Children listen to everything. So, you know, I think it's about just making sure that we're sensitive to them. So from my daughter, for example, I've said to her that there is, you know, a nasty little bug out there and we need to just be washing our hands regularly because we don't want germs. And I've gone to YouTube and I found a video on germs, and she comes in now almost naturally and she just washes her hands as if it's part of her day-to-day routine. I haven't gone into any more detail than that. Now, obviously, there are questions where we're wearing masks out in public in the supermarket. And she'll say, oh, why has he got that on his face, mummy? And I'll just explain to her, well, you know, if he coughs, we could get some germs there. So I think it's just about making sure that we approach it with sensitivity, but also with a certain restraint as well, because they are children. But Sarah, different perspective.
Yeah, I was going to say, with the older children, presumably you can't get away with, you know, they're going to be questioning. Kids of the secondary school age are going to be more inquisitive, aren't they, by nature?
Yeah, absolutely. They are going to be inquisitive. And I think there's kind of two things that I would say. And I would say this for adults as well. And the first is to focus on what's in your control. Because a lot this year, this is why it's been so unsettling, a lot has been taken outside of our control. But actually, what is within our control when we go to school is how we, you know, go into the classroom, how we focus on our learning, how we speak to our friends. That is in our control. So to focus on what's within our control and try not to think too much about all of the bigger stuff, because again, you know, from an adult perspective, this we can explain this to teenagers as well. In our brains, our ego kind of has a need to make sense of this stuff and to process all of this information, which is why we get so hooked into the news and trying to get all of that information. But the fact is, you know, in a way, this is too big for us to understand. So let's look at what's in our control now. And the second thing, again, that I would encourage children of all ages to do is to focus on what we're grateful for, because that really makes a big difference to our mindsets. So, okay, the last academic year didn't go as we were expecting it to, but actually we are grateful to be back in school. We're grateful for what the teachers have done, you know, all of those things. And I think when you can switch your focus from what's going wrong or what might go wrong in the future to actually, I'm okay now in this moment and things are going right, that makes a huge difference. And obviously you would kind of differentiate that conversation according to the age of the child that you're speaking to.
I would say also as educators, as Sarah and I, our background is in education, and I think educating people is important. I think making sure that people have done their research and not also just listened to hearsay and looked at a variety of different sources as well. And I think there is a lot of fear out there at the moment. And I think that also is clouding people's feelings and emotions and also judgment as well. So if we can just...
Goes back, doesn't it? Sorry to jump in, Rebecca. I was just going to say, that goes back to our original point, doesn't it? That it's very difficult to conceal your own anxieties. And as we can see from the question that's come up from one of our viewers here, Sarah, how can you express they're safe when they're not? And I think that encapsulates how a lot of people are feeling, that you know, they are genuinely fearful for their children, you know, and it's perfectly understandable in the middle of the pandemic. So it goes back to that earlier point, doesn't it? That it's very difficult to communicate, don't worry, darling, you're safe, when you don't necessarily feel like your child is safe. And that, again, how do you not pass that anxiety on to your child?
And I think in response to Sarah's question, I think it is about educating them as well as ourselves. And so in response to how can you express when they're safe, when they're not, we need to focus, as what Sarah has said, on what is within our control. So we can keep ourselves safe if we do X, Y, and Z. Now, in an ideal world, that would be lovely, right? If that was all we had to do is X, Y, and Z. But I think it's also about sharing with them that this is not a forever moment. There will come to a time where this will be something that we will look back on and we will move forward from this. So I think it's about giving people hope, but also giving them the tools that they need in order to make sure that they are okay at this moment in time. So share with them, Sarah, and all the other parents and guardians and carers that are watching, share with them that you feel what they're going through at the moment, and share with them that you understand, and share with them that this is not forever, but there are certain things that we can do in order to keep ourselves just that little bit extra safe.
And I would just add to that, Rebecca, that that schools have really been very, very vigilant from what I've seen in ensuring that the children are safe, in putting those measures in place to make sure that the children are as safe as they can be. And all of the expert advice seems to be suggesting that although, yes, it is scary because we really focused on keeping our children safe through this time, but actually they really benefit by being back in school, by being with their peers, by having that social interaction. And I guess where we're coming from is from a mental health point of view, actually that is more of a concern perhaps than how the virus might impact on children, especially given what we know about how the virus impacts children, which seems to suggest that it seems very few children who are directly impacted by the virus. Children seem to, thank goodness, seem to be fairly resilient to the virus.
That's interesting. And just as you say that, so we've had another question there from Shane. My daughter's run down an emotional school after having no school for 6 months, then straight back into a strange world. She's 8. Again, I think it's another really good example of how people are feeling. That we're putting an enormous strain on kids who are really, she's 8. She's a baby still, So it is really difficult, isn't it, to know how to help them process. One thing I was wondering was, obviously, a lot of the stuff we talk about, it is very heavy stuff. It's big stuff for little kids to have to take on board. So how important is it to find a way to be, I suppose, lighthearted or inject some fun into the I know it sounds daft to say fun into a conversation about this, but to find that space to keep things light. Is there a trick to that? Is that important?
I think it's important to, as you say, lighten the mood a bit. And especially, I feel for Shane and Shane's daughter, because I know that there are a lot of children that are feeling that. And I just want to say that being back at school, I feel from my own opinion, is the best place at the moment for these young people, because the longer that we keep them out of school, the more that they will become more anxious. And as Sarah said, that social interaction is really important. They can see their friends and have those enjoyable moments. But how do we kind of make light of this situation, but, without, making it a mockery? I think if you do things with your children that you enjoy and you kind of feed in elements of educating them around what's going on right now, then that's a great way to kind of make light of the situation. So you can journal with your older children if they enjoy journaling, or you can get them to make a time capsule of this moment and pull things together that they've enjoyed over lockdown, or, write a letter to, their younger self from March this year and how much they've changed and they've grown. As a literacy specialist, there's so many different kind of techniques that we can use. And I always say that talking and listening is key for everyone, whether you're young or you're old. Just having those conversations are important. You can paint pictures, you can, use Play-Doh, for example, and create kind of what you want your ideal world to be or your dream world to be. There's loads of examples that we can try with our young people that can just help them to kind of navigate their way through this.
Absolutely. And I think as well, Rebecca, teaching our children to talk, as you said, to talk about their feelings and feel all of the feelings, but also teach them that they have a choice about how they respond as well, that they can move themselves from a state of feeling fearful and upset into a state of being happy. That is possible to make, that move. And children are so naturally so joyful that when they see their friends and they play with their friends and they're smiling, they're happy, they're in that state of joy. And I think, unfortunately, as parents, we then get a lot of the emotion and the anxiety, don't we, at the end of the school day. But I think just making children feel that it's okay to have those moments of joy. We don't have to be kind of worrying about this. We don't have to be thinking about this all of the time. And that's why being back at school is such a good thing, because when children are together, they're naturally going to be more in that space of having fun, of enjoying themselves.
That's lovely. I think actually that's quite an appropriate note on which to end, actually. The idea of our kids having joy and enjoying themselves, because that's essentially what we all want, right? I mean, everything's, obviously the academic element of this is a big consideration, but fundamentally we all want our children to be happy and enjoying themselves, right? And that's what they get to do when they're at school, hopefully.
That is. And I think the teachers are the pivotal moment for that, because if we can start with them and their well-being and then their mindset, then the children will receive the benefits from that. And they will also then take that home to their family. And what parent doesn't want to see their child skipping home from school and telling them about their day and what they've made and, the friendships that they've built. So I think if we start with ensuring that our teachers have that support with coping through this time, I definitely do feel, and I know Sarah agrees with me, that it will just have that positive ripple effect across the community.
Yes, absolutely, Rebecca, because that has been our concern through this time, that we know that parents and schools are putting a lot of energy into supporting our children and their well-being, and absolutely rightly so. But we also know that our teachers are under huge pressure at this time, and we know our children are watching their teachers really closely. So our perspective is, if we can support our teachers in their well-being and in managing their stress and anxiety, that will then have that ripple effect onto the children and to the parents as well.
Brilliant. Well, I hope that's been it's certainly been informative for me, and I hope there's some really, constructive advice in there and real practical tips that hopefully some of us can take. So thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Sarah, for joining. And I hope that's been helpful for everybody at home. Thanks, guys.